Okay, it is 12:15, so we'll go ahead and get started here. So I'm going to share a screen with you guys. We want to share the tariff webinar here. Okay. So I want to thank everyone for signing up for the Iowa Wind and Solar Panel Tariff webinar. My name is Lewis Butler. I have a master's in economics from George Mason University, and I am the sales manager here at Iowa Wind and Solar. If you need to get a hold of us during the webinar, you can drop questions and comments on the right-hand side. I can't currently see them as I have this full screen on my computer, but if you do have questions, we have members of our staff in there right now. You can also get a lot of information from our website, iowawindandsolar.com. You can call us at 1-800-8080-SUN or email us at bbright@iowawindandsolar.com. The presentation today will probably be between 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll have 5 or 10 minutes of questions and answers, and hopefully we'll be wrapped up just a little bit before, say, 12:45. So what are we hoping to cover today? The purpose of the webinar is to explain some proposed policy changes and how they're going to impact our current and future customers. So we're going to provide some historical context of trade disputes. We like to think of it in this way as it helps us try to predict what's going to happen, so having some background knowledge is very helpful. We're going to talk about the Soneva and SolarWorld Section 201 complaint. It is the complaint that is driving the proposed tariff that we're going to be discussing, and that has resulted in the International Trade Commission's ruling on the matter and their proposed remedies, which were recently released. Then we can discuss next steps, which ultimately involve the President and the White House. And then most importantly for you guys, we're going to discuss the impact on our customers. So the first thing is going to be, what is a trade dispute? What are we talking about when we say this? Conceptually, this is a very straightforward affair. Basically what it means is that a domestic industry needs to show that it's been harmed by foreign competition. This can simply mean a foreign company is charging less for their product than a domestic company. Obviously, as a consumer, we want the lowest price possible. As we're trying to help our customers, we're constantly trying to secure the lowest pricing on all of the components so our customers can end up with a low price and the best system possible. So the domestic firms just have to show that they've been harmed. The ITC will not care where the source of that harm has come from, just that they have been harmed. So what do we mean when we say Section 201? As I'm sure no one else is familiar with, the Trade Act of 1974 contains a provision in it that allows the President to act on behalf of domestic firms in order to protect them from quote-unquote unfair competition from foreign competitors. So domestic firms can seek relief under this provision. This was passed back in the 70s as part of the Tokyo round of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. So this has been around for a really long time, but it hasn't been used all that much. The remedy that the President can ultimately use here has to have two components. The first thing is the relief is temporary, meaning it can only last between 4 and 8 years before someone would have to reapply for it. And then the second piece of this is it has to equally apply to all imports from all countries. This is very important because if this Section 201 that's been filed is ultimately successful, in theory, it's not just going to apply to manufacturers from, say, Mexico or from China. It's going to apply to every single country that we might import solar panels from. And considering the United States imports roughly 90% of its panels, this is a very, very big deal. So how common is using this Section 201 trade dispute? It's actually relatively uncommon. Since the 1980s, only 40 cases have been brought before the International Trade Commission. Of those 40 that have been brought, only 50% roughly have been successful. So it's not a very common tactic that's used. The more common tactic that is used is to bring an anti-dumping case in front of the International Trade Commission. Since 2000, so just in the last 15 to 20 years, not only, 400 cases have been brought before the International Trade Commission, and only 7 have been tossed out, meaning roughly 400 cases have been brought before the International Trade Commission, successfully won, and some sort of trade restriction has been imposed upon the country that the complaint was about. I personally think that the type of complaint that the solar companies, the domestic solar companies have put forward indicates they have a high likelihood of winning this case. The Section 201 is a lucrative way to resolve this trade dispute because it applies equally to everyone on a very, very large scale. You would not want to pursue this option if you only had a 50-50 chance of winning, and it's very expensive to do so. If you were hoping to just target one country, say we were getting a lot of panels from South Korea, you would target that one country in hopes of slowing down your competition. This very wide-ranging complaint and the mechanisms by which they can be protected indicates to me that these companies think they have a high likelihood of winning. They must be talking to the administration or policymakers that they have an in with. Otherwise, they would go with this anti-dumping case, which is much easier to win, and even though it is a little bit more specific. So what does the actual trade complaint itself need to consist of? SolarWorld and Suniva needed to show harm. They need to show that serious harm was being caused by the importer of solar panels here in the United States. Considering Suniva and other companies have gone bankrupt or had financial troubles over the last couple of years, this was a relatively easy bar for them to clear. And the second piece of it is that it's impossible for domestic firms to compete. These are the only 2 things that they ultimately needed to show in their complaint. After they've done that, they get to ask for remedies. Suniva requested a price floor of originally 78 cents per watt. They later lowered their request to 74 cents per watt. And SolarWorld requested a quota of 0.22 gigawatts on imported cells and 5.7 gigawatts on modules. Suniva's request here was roughly, depending on which prices you want to use, somewhere between a 50 and 75% increase on the price of imported panels. If we think about how systems are designed, panels and modules and equipment represent a very large portion of the total system cost to our customers. So a big increase in these prices is ultimately going to be passed on to the customers at the end of the day. SolarWorld's quota restrictions that they're asking for represent the United States only being able to import roughly half of the current modules that are being installed. So both of these were very, very severe remedies that were being asked for. So from our point of view, we would hope that this would not happen. If we're out there looking for the best deals that we can for our customers, we want low prices and we want a high availability of these parts. Both of these requests would restrict our ability to do that. As a result, we've been trying to let our customers know for the last couple of months that this tariff or this quota might be coming. We've had a couple of customers who've been able to lock in their lower prices with a larger down payment, and they've saved probably hundreds of thousands of dollars by doing so. So the ITC reviews the case that's been brought before them this spring. On September 22nd, the ITC panel, which is made up of 4 commissioners, ruled 4-0 in favor of Suniva and SolarWorld. They've successfully demonstrated harm has been caused and that a remedy would be in order. On October 31st, the ITC panel released 3 sets of recommendations to be sent to the president. And then the final recommendations to be delivered were actually due yesterday. So we'll go over these 3 sets of recommendations as they all have different sorts of implications. So we'll cover them from the absolute worst to the absolute best case in terms of the recommendations. So the first remedy that was suggested was by Rhonda Schmidt-Lean, who is the current chairman of the International Trade Commission. We don't need to get bogged down in the entire table here, but I've highlighted 2 cells that I think that we should look at. The most important one is the module tariff. She recommended a 35% tariff on imported modules. This is less than what was requested by Suniva and Solar World, but still represents a dramatic price increase for our customers. She also recommended a quota on the amount of panels or cells that can be brought into the United States. So anything below this threshold has 1 tariff on it. Anything above that threshold would have a different tariff on it. It's likely, due to the low volume here, that most of the cells brought into the country would have that 30% tariff. As we said, these remedies are temporary. So over the course of 4 years, that tariff will go down, but it only goes down at 1% per year, which is not a very fast rate to reduce that tariff. So if this recommendation were adopted, we would see a considerable increase in the price of modules and cells coming into the United States. The second remedy, which I personally think is the most interesting remedy for everyone, was jointly written by Commissioners Williamson and Johansson. It's interesting that 2 of them came together, suggesting there's a consensus among a couple of people that this would be a particularly good remedy to employ. You'll notice that the quota volume doubled from the previous remedy, and the module tariff went down by 5%. So it's still a 30% tariff on modules. Many people think this would be a reasonable remedy to employ. And you'll also notice that the tariff decreases at 5% per year versus 1% per year on the previous remedy. So there's something to keep in mind. Many people think this is a reasonable solution for the administration to adopt. It's not the most severe, but it's also not the weakest. Remedy 3, if there were going to be a remedy, which was proposed by Commissioner Broadbent, would be my preference of the 3. There is a quota that applies to cells and modules of 8.9 gigawatts. And then instead of levying a tariff, companies would purchase a license to be able to import their goods into the United States at 1 cent per watt. This is by far the least drastic of all the measures. It would only marginally increase the price of panels and cells and have the lowest amount of impact on consumers. This also, in the eyes of Suniva and Solar World, would do the least to help them. So on the range of options, we have a 35% tariff in our first remedy, and we have a 1 cent per watt license on our last remedy, which also ramps up at roughly 1.4 gigawatts per year, which we would hope would be in line with the growing solar market here in the United States. So now what's going to happen? These commissioners spent a lot of time putting their recommendations down on paper. They're going to send them off to the White House. The White House has 30 days to decide what to do. So President Trump will have until January 12th to come out with a recommendation. Here's why there's a lot of uncertainty. There's no way to know what President Trump is going to do. He is not bound by any recommendations or any rules as to how small or how large the tariff could be. President Trump could pick up the newspaper and read that Suniva is asking for a very large tariff, agree with that and implement that. He could think the Suniva recommendation was not strong enough and go above even what the solar companies had asked for. He can adopt any one of the 3 recommendations from the International Trade Commission. He can combine, mix, and match the recommendations from the International Trade Commission. He could ignore all of those and do nothing, even though the International Trade Commission has decided that harm has been caused and they have made recommendations on remedies. He could just say, you know what, we want to protect American consumers and we want people out there installing solar. We're not going to get involved in this trade dispute. All indications point towards that the White House is going to implement some sort of tariff. The White House has made it known that they support American manufacturing and the president has asked for a variety of tariffs, not specific to the solar industry, but in general, to be brought before him to help out American companies. As a result, White House officials have said, quote unquote, we expect with a 90% chance of certainty that a tariff is on its way. So no White House official has gone on record in saying that, but sources familiar with the matter have suggested that this is coming. We have no idea what it's going to look like, which means something is probably coming. Given the best reasonable recommendations from everyone that we've talked to and what the International Trade Commission has said, we're expecting prices to go up by 10 to 20%, perhaps as high as 25%, ultimately depending on what this final remedy looks like. So what impact is this going to have for our customers? We've already seen prices start to creep up as a result of the anticipation of this tariff or quota. So some of our customers have been able to lock in lower prices by getting in touch with us and securing the numbers that we've shown them in the last 30 days. We've advised some customers to put down larger down payments to lock in their pricing. We expect prices to go up another 10 to 20%. It's important to stress here that anything is possible. Anyone who says with certainty that they know what's going to happen is likely lying to you. That would indicate they have an inside track into how the president is currently thinking and what remedy he thinks will be best. One other area of concern that some customers have asked us about is this going to limit our ability to get panels or other supplies that we need to install their array? The good news is that we've successfully secured panels through Q1 of next year. Everyone who is in our installation lineup right now is not going to have any problem, and our installation should go according to plan. Everything that we are going to be looking at is going to come after this recommendation comes down and after the industry has a chance to fully absorb the impact of any of these implications. The other interesting thing is people have asked, when is this going to go into effect? In theory, the ITC has already ruled on this, and so any remedy could be retroactive going into the past, or it could start at any time in the future. So the president can decide pretty much at any point he is ready to start these remedies, and we will be subject to those remedies to some degree. There's a bunch of other further complications which we could discuss briefly, and that is if the remedy is too severe, the World Trade Organization will come to the ITC and say, hey, this remedy is too severe. You signed into these general trade agreements. This is not in the spirit of those. We are going to punish you for doing this, and other countries may not like that. So if the remedy is too severe, it's likely to be struck down by other organizations. However, if the remedy is not strong enough, it's not going to benefit the domestic industry. So striking a balance here will be relatively important for the administration if they're hoping to have a long-lasting impact in the solar market. So with that, we can start answering some questions. I'm going to head back into my chat here, and we can see what questions people might have. My screen has froze. Here we go. Does anyone have any questions at this time? I'm only seeing a couple of questions in our chat. So the question is, you mentioned prices have gone up, and we expect an additional 10 to 20% increase in prices. How much have they gone up so far? So it really depends at what point in time you want to look at. So when Soneva filed the case back in April to today, prices might have gone up. Depending on who you're buying from and what manufacturer you're getting them from, they probably have already gone up, we'll say approximately 10 to 20%. So in some sense, people are hedging their bets on what they're currently seeing and what they think might happen. So I would say a lot of people are currently doing the wait and see approach. Some people are pretty sure that this is going to happen, and so they're stocking up on their supply now. No problem, Debbie. Happy we could answer your question. There are no other questions. We'll go ahead and end the webinar a little bit quicker. Here we go. Curious how this tariff would or would not impact panels for Puerto Rico installs. That's actually a really great question. It's only going to impact it in the sense that the price is going to go up. So if the demand is going to remain there and people are willing to pay for it, the installation still should be able to go ahead. If the panels have already been secured, the price really isn't going to change. It would just change the economic side of it and the financial side of it going into the future, and how much money people are willing to pay for the cost of their power. Brock asked, how will this affect the implications of large-scale solar integration worldwide? If we looked at here in the US, the larger the installation, the larger your array, the more this tariff is going to impact you. So if you're a business and you're looking at installing a lot of solar panels, the impact is going to be greatest because a big chunk of your installation is going to be dedicated to the modules themselves. If you're doing smaller residential or small commercial, you're still going to see an impact, but part of your cost is going to be engineering and the time and energy to get that first panel up, and each panel after that becomes a little bit cheaper. So the large-scale projects are going to be hurt the most by this increase. Someone asked, do the prices for SolarWorld and Suniva panels go up as well, given they are domestic manufacturers? So the price that they're charging or they're able to charge is going to remain higher. So let's just say, for example, panels are coming into the US right now at 60 cents per watt. Suniva and SolarWorld need prices to be at 70 cents per watt in order to remain in business. Currently, many people would buy these imported solar panels at the lower price. Suniva and SolarWorld would not be able to compete. After the tariff, maybe the price goes up to 72 cents per watt for an imported solar panel, and Suniva and SolarWorld can now charge 72 cents per watt because all they need to do is match the price of these imported solar panels. So they're going to benefit from basically what amounts to a lack of competition. Someone asked, how will this affect the payback period of my array? Anytime the price of the components of the array go up, the price of your system is going to go up. When the price of your system is go up, there's a good chance your payback period is going to go up as well. This is why we've been encouraging the customers who've been on the fence for a while to go ahead, lock in those lower prices, get their installations on their calendar, and then they can know for certainty going forward what their payback period is going to be and what their rate of return is going to be. If there's any more questions, we'd love to take them. I don't have good insight onto the company that you're referring to, Nathan, about when they're going to be able to ship their new panels or not. If we have someone in our office who knows, we'll put them in touch with you. Well, if there are no more questions, we'll go and wrap up the webinar. We'll put this online. If you think of any other questions, you should go ahead and reach out to us. You can reach us at 1-800-8080-SUN. You can email us, bebright@iowawindandsolar.com. Debbie asked, you mentioned large scale. Is most hurt was considered large scale? Large scale, it's going to depend upon a couple of factors. I would say once you start getting above, say, for a commercial company, it's going to depend on how much money you're spending and what you're comfortable with spending. So if $100,000 is a lot to you and that price goes up by 10%, that $10,000 might mean a lot to you. But if we're talking about installing $1 million array or say a 1 megawatt array, a 10% price increase there might be $100,000 or $200,000. So it just depends on your ability to absorb that impact and what your current energy costs are. So it's a little bit of a sliding scale that's different for everybody. Did that answer your question, Debbie? Okay, great. We have 1 more minute for questions here before we wrap up. If you guys want to drop in there what the most helpful thing to know out of today's webinar was, that'd be helpful for me to know what we should be telling our customers or what I should be doing more research on. Or you can tell me your favorite part of the Trade Act of 1974. I know we all have a copy next to our bed at home that we like to read. Okay, we will officially wrap up this time. Again, our phone number is 1-800-8080-SUN. You can email us, bebright@iowawindandsolar.com. You can also go to our website, iowawindandsolar.com, and get all sorts of information. You should like us on Facebook. We're always showing pictures of some of our great new installations. We're putting up a utility-sized array for the city of Bloomfield. That's going to be 1.8 megawatts. We're really proud of that project. We're working on a whole bunch of other stuff. We hope you guys follow us, like us, and let us know what we can be doing better for you guys, and let us know what you want our next webinar to be on. Thanks for joining us.